Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Sarah Frank. Sarah is the founder and president of Simple Studies. Simple Studies was founded in 2020 to combat education inequity, especially in light of virtual learning in the midst of a global pandemic. The organization provides students with free resources created for and by students. Sarah, thank you for joining us today on Hopeful Conversations. Welcome.
I'm excited to hear.
Can you share with our listeners why you chose to create Simple Studies?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time the pandemic hit, it was March 2020. I was a junior in high school. I grew up in Florida and, COVID was bad everywhere. But to me at the time, at least, it felt really specifically bad in Florida and like where I was. Everything immediately was, of course, in lockdown. Um, and I have a high risk family member. And so we were pretty much hunkered down in our house. Um, and a couple things that are relevant here. At the time, I was student body president at my high school, and I knew students at my high school were struggling. And so this was originally a pitch for a project at my high school. Um, and my fellow board members, the vote overall was no to doing this. And they, worried that it was a lot of work or that people wouldn't use it. And they were right. It was a lot of work when I went off to do it on my own. But the second thing about me is that I really like feeling helpful and having something to do. I really thrive with like to-do lists and organizational things. And I really sort of was just wandering around my house, like, doing my work for classes, but was missing that like sort of volunteering or student government or like the engagement with other people in a way that felt helpful and productive. And I was like, well, I don't need to make it specific to my high school. I don't need to make it with people from my high school. Like there's a whole world of people out there that are interested in being helpful to other students. And so that's sort of where the original spark came from.
Kind of interesting. So you kind of made lemonade out of lemons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. And you're a natural leader if you shared with us that you were a student body president as a junior, but I would imagine thinking about college as a junior and what that was looking like in application. So explain like Simple Studies to our listeners where it's at today.
So when I was going into college, so I had about a year of running Simple Studies before I had to think about, what am I going to do while I'm in college? Part of me is like, this is something that's, really important to me and I want to continue to work on it. And the other part of me was like, I want to be able to enjoy my freshman year and all years afterwards without having the day-to-day commitments. Because at the time I was working on it for like multiple hours a day. And so trying to strike a balance between doing something that like really matters to you and also making space for other things that could potentially matter to you in the future was a little bit tricky. So what I did for my freshman year was I stepped back in from the like day-to-day role and had some board members that had been with me for a few months. And a couple of them had been with me for over a year, take on more of the day-to-day operations. And I was more in like an oversight role for most of my freshman year of college. So I was checking in, having like a monthly call with board members, just to like check in and see how things were going. And that gave me room to explore, friendships and friend groups and classes and clubs and organizations at Brown, which is where I did my undergrad. And that was really helpful for me. I ended up after freshman year taking it back into my control and sort of switching to a model that I saw as like a sustainable model, right? Like the material is already on there. The material doesn't need upkeep. We've covered most of the classes. And so I switched it over to, instead of making new stuff, just spreading the word about what we already have. And that's sort of...
And what do you have? What is the...
That's a really, important piece of information I should have mentioned. So Simple Studies originally started to create AP study guides for students to access for free. There's a lot of really incredible resources out there like Khan Academy and Princeton Review and all of those books and textbooks and programs. But with the exception of Khan Academy, pretty much all of them require that you spend money, even if it's not initially that there's, this like freemium plan where you later have to pay for it. And I went to a high school where a lot of kids couldn't swing that. And that's a very normal thing to not be able to pay for additional educational resources. So we made study guides for free. We would have students either submit study guides that they'd already written or look back at their notes and write ones following like our guidelines. Then we'd have other students edit. It expanded to also include a blog where people give advice and students, can share things that have worked for them and think like pieces of advice that they want to pass on. For a time, we also did tutoring and study buddy matching, like during the heat of the pandemic. We've had some other offspring programs. We do like summaries of colleges and short stories and books and things like that. But basically, the idea is we're providing resources that students are able to access that was written by other students, like not some professional 20 years out of his high school career that doesn't really understand like what the material is or how it's linking together. It's students fresh from the course that understand what is maybe difficult to remember, what might be on the AP exam, and thinking through the brain of the same kind of person that's going to be reading it. So that's what we offer, and that's still, all of that is still available on the website in terms of study guides and the articles.
And for free.
And for free, always for free. There's never been a price tag. A few times throughout the 5 years that I've been running it, people have tried to buy it. People have tried to convince me to, put like some stuff behind a paywall. There have been efforts to get me to monetize it. Because I will say, for the first chunk of my time in simple studies, I was just funding it. So I was actually in the red, because even if you don't make money, you still required to spend money, right? So we have to pay for the web plan, we have to pay for the domains, we have to pay for the emails. All of our work was volunteer, so you don't have to pay for labor or anything, but there are still like costs. And so I was just paying them myself. So we did eventually put ads onto the site. And so ads sort of help cancel out the cost of keeping the organization up. But I've been very resistant to adding any other sort of paywall or financial revenue.
That's awesome. It sounds like initially part of your mission and your desire was to combat education inequity.
Yeah.
Can you explain that from like your lens, what that looked like as a high schooler or potentially in college?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most impactful like graphics I've ever seen is this picture. I'll try to paint it with my words, but if you look up inequality versus inequity, it's usually one of the first results. And it's this picture of a kid trying to look over a fence, and he's standing on a box, and he's pretty tall, so he can see. And then there's this other kid, this really short kid. He's given the same box. Does not help him see over the fence. It just makes him higher on the fence. Like, he still cannot see. And that's what equality is, right? Equality is, here's this for you, and here's the same thing for you, regardless of what the needs are. And the flip side of equality is equity, and it's giving people what they need proportion to how badly they need it or what specifically that they need. And so in the equity version of this graphic, tall kid gets his box. You can see the shorter kid has like 3 boxes, and he can see over the fence too. And it's about boosting people up so they're at the same place and they have the same level of opportunity, not about just giving everybody the same thing. And so when I look at my high school is a Title I public high school. And if you don't know what Title I means, it's basically that a large percentage of the students are at or below the poverty line, and the school has that designation to indicate that there are some students that might need additional support. I'd like to think that there's additional support going into schools that are Title I that need that additional support. I don't know how extensive that is, and it certainly doesn't make up for the entire gap of opportunity and resource. And so Simple Studies sort of came out of the idea of like, we're all expected to go sit at home and take, AP Lit or AP Environmental Science. I've got a computer with great internet connection. I've got 2 college-educated parents. I have access if I needed to order a textbook or something, like I could order myself one. I'm thinking about all the kids that are in the exact same class that I am, that, maybe have a struggling internet connection, or maybe have to share a computer with their little brother. Like if I had to share my computer with my little brother, we would have been fighting so long, neither of us would be able to use the computer, And so there's all these things that like make the same opportunity not actually an equal opportunity. And so simple studies was sort of, we're trying to be an additional box in that graphic, so to speak, like boosting up students that need access to just be at the same level of opportunity that other students just come into school and come into other places with.
Awesome. Great job explaining. I actually am in graduate school right now.
Oh,
and I'm taking this same graphic was just introduced this week. It's a really beautiful graphic.
Yeah.
And just equity as a leader of what you can bring to a team, but really like equity can be brought into every single space. Where as a 17-year-old do you think you gained like that perspective as being a value?
I think my high school honestly was a great educational opportunity. Very different. My middle school and elementary school was a little bit more like homogeneous, and that everybody sort of came from similar backgrounds. And my high school was just so incredibly diverse economically, racially, religiously, in terms of gender and like even area, because it was a magnet school. And so I think I learned a lot from moving environments into a space that was just so inherently diverse and creative. And my creative writing teacher that I had for 3 years, her name was Mrs. Curry. And Mrs. Curry was just an incredible role model. And she taught me a lot about, so many things. She taught me a lot about writing, but in the context of this conversation, she taught me a lot about what it means to, as, a middle-class white woman coming into a space, and what like my positionality means and what privilege is. And she taught me a lot about like what the world needs. And I thought a lot, I think just the way my brain works, thought a lot about like how I could maybe be helpful in filling those gaps. And COVID was truly a terrible time and a truly terrible thing, but it gave me the opportunity to really think about that more. And I had a lot more time on my hands. And I just hate being bored. So I guess it was a combination of the time was right for me to be able to explore these thoughts, but also a lot of people at my school and my teachers had sort of prepared me to be thinking about this already. And I was predisposed to like wanting to try to help fix these things that are such massive issues.
Hats off to Mrs. Curry. Miss Curry. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think the influence that teachers can have on young people is so, so powerful.
Yeah.
Your Simple Studies has hit or touched a lot of people. And I have a quote from your website. It says your organization, every individual deserves to have the resources and support they need to succeed in school. Education shouldn't have a price tag, and success should not be for sale.
Yes.
Can you break that down for our listeners? Exclamation part. Awesome.
I remember writing that when I was redoing the website after my freshman year, because I was just sort of putting things back into order on the site. I remember writing that and thinking like, this seems like such a basic concept, right? Like it seems like education and success not being for sale should be our baseline, right? Like that should be like the place that we're operating from, and it's not. Like that's not at all where we are as a society. And I don't know that significant progress has been made since then. I think there's been a lot of like grassroots efforts and organizing, and people doing similar work to like what I've done with Simple Studies. And I think, not to stray too far from the topic of conversation, but I think there's also been a lot of like restrictions and undoing of education programs and books and libraries and school funding, and so COVID was a time I was worried about education quality and education equity for COVID related reasons, and now I'm still worried. It just looks a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation of topic that's really, really important for people to be aware of? You mentioned that you grew up in Florida. That's where your high school was.
Yep.
Like Florida, from the outside, I'm in Colorado, like does not have, from my personal lens, the best representation of for young people, like what's happened in your state. Like that's really
Correct.
tough. And now you just graduated from Brown. Like,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about how, that experience getting there, and like maybe for like our listeners, the application process and like the process of really going high and reaching it. And
Yeah, it was such an, going back, I hate to, bring COVID back into the conversation again, but because I was a senior in 2021 and was, submitting my first applications in the fall of 2020, it was such a weird time to be applying to college for so many reasons. One of them being I was like, am I even going to be able to go to college? Like going back to the time, like I had no idea like when it would be safe to exist in the world again. Like I really had no idea if this was going to be, another couple months and it was going to be, done by my senior spring of high school, or if this was going to last significantly
yeah,
longer than that. And so
we
because I
didn't
was in
know.
such a place of like uncertainty, I combined that with also the fact that everybody else was. And so I sort of panicked and I applied to 19 colleges. I would not recommend that to anyone. I would actually just recommend, if you can, just applying early to whatever your dream school is. I knew Brown was my dream school. If I could do it all over, I would have just applied early decision. I didn't apply early decision because I was worried about affording it and I hadn't heard back from any of the scholarships that I had applied to, and I wasn't going to hear back until spring. So my worry was, what if I get in and then I can't afford it and then I have to back out, and then like would I have submitted other applications? Like it was just the whole thing and I was stressed. So I panic applied. And I say panic applied, but I really spent like weeks, maybe months, like reading all my essays. And the other part for me was, after spending 24/7 at home in my house for months, it would end up being a year and 2 months, the thought of moving 1,000 miles away was so terrifying. Like, I feel so lucky. I have such an incredible relationship with both of my parents. Um, and the thought of moving so far away from them was just so scary. And I do have family in New England, so that's another part of it. I was like, if I'm leaving family, I better be near other family. So I mostly applied to schools that were either drivable from Tampa, like back in Florida, or like in the South enough, that I could drive there, or family that was drivable in places that were drivable from family in New England, because that was really important to me. And it's scary to like go out on your own into a new place. It was definitely worth it, and I can talk more about that. But it was quite a journey trying to figure out where I was going to go and how I was going to get there.
Panic applied. I have not heard that term from a young person.
Yeah, it's funny because like when I say panic applied, I don't mean I was like, oh my god, I gotta apply. Like I actually read these essays so thoroughly, like ad nauseum, and really, really took the time to like make all of my applications the best it could be. But I did not need to apply to 19 schools. I had no intention. I don't think, like, I couldn't have seen myself going to some of them. Like some of them were backups and they were safeties. A couple I just applied to because they were free to apply to. And it was, I wouldn't say a waste of time because it's not like I had that much else going on. Like it wasn't like I was missing, senior prom to do this. Like I was trapped in my house anyway. But yeah, I would not recommend doing that. And for anybody listening that's applying, like if you have a dream school, just apply for it early. Save all your essays because they'll ask a lot of the same questions in different wording. And trust your gut of where you feel like you're going to be most happy and successful.
Did you hear that advice from anybody? I like that advice. Trust your gut. And
I feel very lucky that I did. Like both my parents were so helpful and such great sounding boards throughout like the entire college application process. Ultimately, what actually happened, so I got into Vanderbilt, which is an incredible institution with like a crazy special scholarship. And I felt so grateful for that. And that was like early March. And so in my mind, I was like, there's no way I'm getting into like Brown or Harvard. So I'm going to Vanderbilt. And like in my brain, I was going to Vanderbilt. Like I made friends there. I followed everybody on Instagram. I joined like Zoom calls of other people that had gotten in. I was, anchoring down. Like I really, really thought that I was going to go to Vanderbilt, but I just didn't, the odds of getting into a school like Brown are so slim. And then when I got into Brown, I was so thrilled because it was my dream school. But then I also had this moment of like, what am I supposed to do now? Because I could go to the school that feels more like me, feels like a place that I would be happier, place that I would settle after college, but costs so much more money. Or do I go to the place that, is essentially free, but I don't know how well I fit there, and I don't know how well it feels like me. Fortunately, I ended up getting a scholarship that really helped I wouldn't say even, not even close to even, but like helped slightly level the playing field to make it easier. But my parents were like really good listeners of the whole process. They didn't push me either way. But when I made the decision I made, which was to pick Brown, they were like, we'd rather help support you in paying for an incredible, wonderful 4 years of your life than have you go for free to somewhere that doesn't feel like home. And I remember them being so supportive of that decision and helping me figure it out. But it was tricky because I felt like I was like choosing between two incredible options, which meant inherently missing out on one or the other.
Yeah, you had great opportunities. Gal, you're also helping with frank advice, which I like, and we can talk about a little bit. But like, so if to our listeners that are juniors in college and essay brainstorming or seniors, I know most of the seniors right now are like really the block of like knowing what to write about and just what do you remember of that, or what's your advice there?
So because I'm a writer, like that's sort of my shtick and my background and also my major, I didn't really have any trouble, admittedly, coming up with ideas. In fact, I had trouble limiting myself and figuring out which idea to go with. I wrote like 6 completely different personal essays. And so while I didn't have the trouble of like coming up with what to write, I had 2 problems figuring out, what to send where. I wrote like 6 essays. So I'm like, how do I pick one? The other one was the other difficulty that I had was simultaneously wanting to present myself in a way that felt authentic while also avoiding like I wanted to come across authentically, but I also wanted to come across as special is not the right word, but like you want your application to seem unique.
It has to, doesn't
exactly. it? And that's the tricky part, right? Because like you don't. When I read a lot of essays that I edit for people through Frank Advice, and sometimes I read an essay that I'm just like, you didn't write this, like a thesaurus did. Like you looked up words that will make you sound smarter, and it doesn't sound like a person wrote it. Like sometimes I read an essay, it's just a piece of paper or even just like on my screen, and I feel like I know the person. And it pulls them out of 2 dimensions into 3 dimensions, and I really feel like I know them. And now being on the flip side of this and reading so many essays, I look back at mine and I'm like, I hope I had the same thing. Sometimes I read an essay and I'm just like, it feels like you're trying to be who you want me to perceive you as and not just being who you are authentically on your own without the impending judgment of an essay editor or an admissions officer. And I think that is like, that undeniably is difficult when you're applying to college. I think in other things too, right? Like you want to seem unique and you want to stand out, especially like you're applying for jobs, you're applying for college, like, but also you want to be authentic. And I think arguably the authentic part is more important.
I love the word authentic. And why are we afraid of it sometimes? Like, I don't, and that's not, I don't think that's an age, or, like young people, like certainly the competitiveness comes into that decision-making process, but like that happens as adults too. Like, but authenticity is like so much easier to live with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would always rather be authentic and forgotten than inauthentic and remembered. I would never want people to think of me as like something, that I'm not, or something that I, was pretending to be. And I think that, is difficult, but I feel and this sounds so cliche, but like I feel content with who I am. I've learned so much over the years, um, and am constantly like learning more. And so I think, it's a different thing to change in the sense that you're growing versus change in the sense that you're altering yourself intentionally to fit what people want from you or see in the future for you. If that makes sense.
Wow, that's very deep. That's really good. Like as a grad student writing my last two papers for where I'm on a quarter system and I have two papers to turn in on Sunday, like that's good.
I haven't
Really
had
good.
anything due in a while, which is so refreshing since I've graduated. I'm like, and I'm starting a new 9 to 5. I'm like hopping in the 9 to 5 hamster wheel soon. But I will say it's been refreshing that there's like a distinction between like day and I go home and there's nothing I need to work on. Like in college, like you go home from class or you go home from grad school and there's still more. It's not over yet. Whereas like at least with work now, I've discovered there's some serenity after work and in the evenings. Which has been really nice, honestly.
What about the priority of like mental health and like taking care of yourself as a, can you remember back in high school or
I
advice for a
Yeah,
young college student? Like there's
absolutely.
pressure all around.
There's so much pressure. I could talk about this for like a whole other podcast episode because I feel so strongly about this. I have struggled with anxiety since I was 10. My little bit of background is that this sounds so like it sounds like it's fake. But this is the real story. And so I was at this summer camp, the summer before 5th grade. And my friend and I wanted to make a video, and we thought it'd be really funny if I pretended to be a squirrel in the video. And and we were like, we should have acorns. And like, there's not really acorn, like a significant amount of acorns in Florida. And so my friend the next day at summer camp brought a plate of peanuts. And I was like, this is perfect. Let's pretend they're acorns. And so I'm like shoveling peanuts with like my little hand, like I'm a little squirrel on the ground, and I scooped one into my eye. And unbeknownst to me, I had an anaphylactic peanut allergy. Um,
Gosh,
and so my eyelids swelled shut. And if you can imagine what that's like as a 10-year-old at summer camp that doesn't
pretty
have any
scary.
allergies that she knows of,
Wow.
to not be able to open your eyes and have literally no idea what's happening is so scary. And so, they took me to the camp nurse and she called my mom, and my mom came and got me. We went to urgent care and they gave me medicine of some sort and I was fine. And then they were like, you're going to need to do some testing. We need to figure out what this happened. And at no point did it occur to any of us that I would have a peanut allergy because my mom, dad, and brother all love peanuts and peanut butter. And I just never ate it. I was so picky that I just refused to eat anything nutty and honestly saved my own life. So this is for you, picky eaters. Not really. This is a very rare occurrence that you find out about an anaphylactic allergy this late. But anyway, so they did testing and they found out if I were to have eaten the peanuts in the video, like God forbid, my throat would have closed up, and within minutes I could have died. Had there probably wasn't anyone in the room with like an EpiPen for me, because no one knew I needed one. And so I went to so many doctor's appointments where they were like, you need to be really careful about everything that you touch, everybody that you interact with, everything that you eat. You need to learn how to read all the food labels. You can't eat anything, someone's mom baked a cake, not for you. You want to open a door handle, do it with your sweatshirt sleeve over. Like learning that like these like infinitesimal amounts of substance, like
At like 11.
like I internalized that so deeply. And I honestly think that the doctors and everybody that was like scaring me, like they did the right thing. Like I needed to take it seriously. So I don't fault them for this at all. Like everybody did exactly what they needed to do to keep me safe. Um, but I still hold on to that. I'm 23. It's been 13 years. I still hold on to those fears. And I don't even have the allergy anymore. I did oral immunotherapy. I'm not allergic to peanuts anymore. It's a wonderful thing. If you have an allergy, look into oral immunotherapy, please. At the time I did it, it was like super new and experimental, and now it's like widespread. Um, but the anxiety that like at any moment something really terrible could happen to me, when you tell that to somebody that's 10, And it's so real and it's so ever present. Like, it's impossible not to be anxious. And I've carried that anxiety through so many things, not even just about the allergy, but, about other things. Like, I have a lot of health anxiety. Um, and I have a lot of sort of, like FOMO, like fear of missing out. It's not exactly anxiety, but it's in a similar wavelength. And the first week of college, it was my first time ever away from home for a significant amount of time. I locked myself in my room for like 30 minutes and I was like sobbing, calling my parents. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I think I need you guys here. Like what if something happens to me and I'm alone in my dorm room? Like, and I just went on this like panic spiral for like almost the whole first week of college. I had a hard time sleeping. It was really anxious the whole time, and I'm not allergic to peanuts anymore, but it's still eating in the dining hall was like a new experience. I'd never been able to share in food in that way. Sorry, I realize I've talked about this for a while, but I've had a lot of trials with anxiety, and I feel like the greatest things that I've learned, I'll just rapid fire them. I would say there's 4, maybe 5. One, I think therapy is such a wonderful thing. I literally have a hat that says go to therapy. I think there should be no stigma around it. I think everybody, regardless of how emotionally stable they are, should go to a therapist once in their life. Whoever you are, no matter how emotionally stable you think you are or you might be, there's always something worth talking about and like worth having a conversation about. And for a
I
lot of
agree.
people, I think especially with men, it's hard to open up and have an emotional conversation about something. Like, it's really hard to sort of reveal that part of yourself. And so a therapist is a great place. No one needs to know. If you don't want to tell anyone, you don't need to tell anyone. Go to therapy, try it out once. If you hate it, you don't have to go back. But I think it's wonderful just to be able to talk something through. And if you like being the center of attention, then you'll love therapy because it is all about you. I joke with my therapist all the time. I'm like, ready for my spotlight. Like, let's talk about me for an hour. Like, and it's so wonderful. The second thing I think is having like a resource list, or sort of like a if anxious do X list. So I have like a whole list of things that my boyfriend has, my parents have a copy of it, like a couple of my friends, like my roommate. Like, if I'm having a panic attack, like, here's the things that work. Like, here's the tried and true resolutions, mantras, things that I say to myself. One of my favorite things is I imagine myself in 24 hours being okay. So I'm having a panic attack at night. 24 hours? No, I'm fast asleep. I'm in a dream. I'm in Candyland in 24 hours from now. The third thing, I feel like for me, I'm very much into like physical comfort. Like, I will wrap myself in a blanket. As you can see, I'm wearing like, or I guess if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see, but trust me, I'm wearing a very comfy sweatshirt. I've got my fuzzy socks on. I've got my Snoopy blanket. And like finding like physical comfort, I feel like works for me with the emotional discomfort. And then the last thing, I have found so much power and strength in just being so honest with the people around me. Like, I'm feeling a little off today. I'm feeling a little anxious. Like the other day, was meeting a friend for lunch and I was like, I might have to leave early because I'm kind of off my game today. Sorry in advance. And I didn't end up having to, but it just made me feel so much better going into this situation, setting the expectation that if I need to leave, I can, and I don't even really have to explain significantly why. And setting expectations with the people around you and just being so honest with them. They've probably gone through something similar too. But if they're good friends, like if your friends are good friends, they will understand if you need a minute and if you need to step away. Um, and I think there's great strength in that. And I also really respect when people say that to me, like, "Hey, Sarah, like I'm really struggling. Might need to take a rain check. How about next week?" And I'm like, "Of course." Like, I so appreciate that you trust me enough to share that with me. Like, I take that as such a huge compliment. Um, that I'm trustworthy enough that someone wants to share that with me, and I think most people feel that
Awesome. Awesome. You're wise, Sarah. You're young and you're wise. I very much appreciate that. You mentioned going to therapy. Unfortunately, if we want to talk about inequity, sadly, therapy in 2025 is really a luxury for most people. I do like the resource list. That's a great tool. Like, that does not take money. That does not take
Yeah.
figuring that out and sharing that with other people. Physical comfort, may we all like have access to that. But honesty and vulnerability, like we can all do that.
Absolutely.
And that's, we talk about being authentic.
Yeah.
That is where it's at. That's awesome. Oh goodness. Sarah, where can our listeners find you and what's next for you? You graduated from college and you're about to embark on a new adventure.
Yes, the adventure of a 9 to 5. So my other simple studies related, education equity related adventure with Frank Advice is I have an account on TikTok at Frank Advice, and I try to post about college life. If you scroll back far enough, you'll find pictures of me, crying in my dorm room, and you'll have videos of me frolicking on the main green and having a picnic. And that is college life, I think, in its truest form. And so I try to post a lot about that. So you can find me there. If you're looking for resources for school, simplestudies.org. Shameless plug. It's a great place to go. And there's contact information on there if, folks are interested in helping out with some of the simple studies resources. We're, always looking to build what we can offer. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so honored that you thought of me, and hopefully some of the stuff I said was either helpful or interesting, maybe both. If we want to get a little crazy, maybe it was both. But yeah, it was great to talk with you and to hopefully provide some.
Well, I'm not going to let you go that easily, and no shameless plug. Your Instagram is at Sarah Frank.
Sarah_Frank. Yes.
_ Thank you. And then at Frank Advice for TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
At Sarah.Frank for your personal TikTok.
Yes.
Do we want that in there? Is that fine?
Yeah, that's fine. It's like Rhode Island
simplestudies.org. Simplestudies.org. Okay, I end every podcast with the same question, and this is just for you to answer today, Sarah. What does the world need to hear right now?
That's such a great question. Oh, so I heard this quote the other day, and I think it just made me feel a little better about, where we are in the world. It's a Martin Luther King Jr. quote, and I hope I get this exactly right. It's something to the effect of, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I like to believe that that's true, and I hope that that's true. And I think, for all the folks out there that are advocating for each other and for communities, and having conversations about equity and equality and what that looks like, keep up the good fight. We're all in this together, as they say in High School Musical. And hopefully the Martin Luther King Jr. quote rings true ultimately.
Awesome. Love the reference to High School Musical and, of course, Martin Luther King Jr. Sarah Frank, thank you so much for joining me today for a hopeful conversation. And to our listeners, be sure to tune in to our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on, pain ends. Thank you, Sarah.